Really sure if that's true.
Okay.
In any case, welcome back to another episode of Blockchat. I'm Makram Hani. No, joking. Today we don't have Makram Hani on Blockchat, but we have two other members of our team, Julia Buchholz, our CMO, and Daniel Kaines, our head of risk, visiting here in Ljubljana, our offices for a couple of days of working together to work on future things that we're gonna do, right? And that we are already been preparing and working on for the past couple of months, I would say. We're gonna talk about a couple of things that happened during their visit here this week. But overall, how are you feeling Slovenia and Ljubljana so far? Julia?
I love it.
It's your first time, right?
Yeah, it's my first time in Ljubljana in Slovenia. For those who don't know, I live in Australia, but I'm originally from Germany. And all my life I would go, I would pass the mountains, but I would take the exit to Italy. And this time I took the exit to Slovenia, and I'm absolutely surprised. And I didn't expect anything, and I found a little paradise, didn't we, Daniel? You as well, you love it as well.
Yeah, I love it here. So this is my third visit now to Slovenia. You can't get rid of me. Yeah, I love it. Love your city. Love coming to work in the office. I think as much as we can get done online and remotely, it's always great to be able to sit down together at a table and talk and work and make great progress, and then enjoy everything that your city's got to offer, namely the food.
Yeah. All right. So today what we're gonna talk about is a couple of things. We're gonna bring you up to speed to recent developments. It's mainly, I would say, in the assets that we've onboarded for Oceanpoint and staking, new real estate owners joining basically our DAO through that process. And we're gonna then talk about the special visit, let's say, that we've had together. And last but not least, what's next? Like, what are the next steps that you can expect? At the end, we're gonna, go into the next real estate asset that's going to be offered for purchasing the tokens through the secondary market on Oceanpoint. And and that's, I think, a good program for a good half an hour, maybe 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So Daniel, Daniel, for everybody who doesn't know, he's really on top and in charge of all the assets that are being onboarded. We have like a weekly meeting that we call asset onboarding. Besides the three of us, there's as well Makram. We review all the assets that come in, but ultimately the heavy lifting in that process is actually conducted by Daniel. And can you tell me a bit more of that process itself? What happens before the property is even considered for tokenization, and then the process of tokenizing it, where I'm directly involved as well, obviously.
Yeah.
But and what's the kind of rate of progress that we're making right now with the team size we have, right?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the tokenization process, it starts with the initial consultation with the asset owner, and this could be done really to help them understand tokenization and staking and really kind of inform them, make them more knowledgeable. From there, we move on to a submission of their property, where a lot of the key details of the property are submitted, along with a lot of the key documentation that we would need in order to verify those key parts of the property. It's then my job to review the property that's come in. That review, that onboarding review, consists of looking at things such as ownership documentation, which is a requirement in order to tokenize your property. We have to be sure that ownership is one and the same. Evidence and verification of things like an APY, evidence and verification of location, the geolocation, which of course is brought on chain, so it's quite a crucial component. Then of course debt, so any debt facilities that might be attached to the property, which is of course within real estate quite often you see. So that involves establishing what kind of debt, the amount of debt in proportion of equity, and then the documentation we would need in order to verify that information. And then last but not least is ensuring that we've got great images of the property, ensuring that we're able to tokenize property and display it for everyone to see on the marketplace. So that's the really initial onboarding process. And
can I ask you here a couple of things you mentioned as well? Evidence of APY. What is this actually? Because what does it mean? Maybe, I know obviously, but what does that mean?
Sure. So the APY, which is the annual percentage yield, not mistaken, reflects the gross return that property makes. So if we've got a domestic rental, a rental apartment, for example, and the submission made by the asset owner states an APY of 5%. We then need to verify that is indeed correct. Of course, for the process of staking, the APY plays a much less significant role. But if it's part of the submission, we include it in our due diligence and make sure that we validate that on behalf of everyone that's going to be viewing the property. So in terms of what we would expect in documentation, I would say the lion's share of properties that we see are managed by tenant agencies, by property management companies. And one of the benefits of that is weekly or monthly statements that asset owners receive, stating the income earned, the management fees, and so on. So this is a great documentation to be used to verify the revenue that property generates. It gives us a timestamp, it gives us a known, searchable and validated third party, and it gives us the key figures we need to perform that verification.
I know that you started like a side thing as well. Can you talk about it or no?
The side thing,
the AI thing that you're doing in the back. Is that something that you're feeling comfortable revealing a bit about right now or not yet?
We can tease the community a little bit with some info there. Yeah, so we're exploring other resources available to us to help enhance our ability to verify, validate, and effectively reduce risk to potential BSPT purchasers. And one of the avenues we're exploring is to leverage language models in the review of lease agreements. So this could be all the way from a commercial lease agreement on a factory or an office down to a domestic lease agreement for a rental apartment. We all agreed that it's quite important for us to understand the structure of these lease agreements, and if there are any parts within the lease agreement that might be of concern and that need to be presented to potential BSPT purchasers. So we're leveraging AI, a large language model, which we're training on a very large data set of lease agreements covering multiple countries, with the aim of this language model then being able to be fed a lease agreement with personal information redacted, with the goal of highlighting parts of the lease that might be of concern or might just need raising. So yeah, that's a project that's underway, and we're hoping to then include that within the onboarding procedures, hoping to really set the bar for compliance and risk assessment.
Awesome. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I find that incredible. Like Daniel is doing like all this like super complex work with risk analysis, and now this like screening or using AI to actually go through all these lease agreements. I was wondering, for those of our investors or community who are normally not in real estate, when you talk about the revenue and the APY, revenue, for example, can be rental income. What else could revenue be? Could it be a development, for example, or like?
Yeah, so typically what we will see is revenue in the form of a tenanted building, where the landlord, the owner, is a non-domiciled within that property. So they have a tenant, they have a lease agreement in place, and that lease agreement specifies the revenue and the amounts paid. One variation could be where you have a property that is owned by the asset owner, but also occupied by the asset owner. For example, it's their business and they own the property that business operates within. And typically what you see with that structure is that the landlord in one form or another charges their SALP or their business rent. So again, though the ownership structure and the tenancy structure is slightly different, the revenue bearing component of the property is still rental income. Those sourced from the asset owner themselves. Yeah.
But in that case, because in the corporate resolution, for instance, we have from legal standpoint of view or obligation standpoint of view, is the issuer, the owner of the asset, kind of states a percentage of all net revenues after taxes on a kind of yearly basis to be directed towards token holders.
Yeah.
Now, could we think of it like if it's a business that owns a real estate asset, would you say that in that resolution you could see a very lower percentage of those revenues basically to represent this rent? Because a lot of times in this kind of setup, maybe the rent is being kind of charged, but it's not an agreement with itself, right?
Sure.
It's an internal non-written agreement, right? Sure. In a way. And because the business needs to perform just the same as the other business that doesn't own the real estate asset.
Sure.
And needs to rent it, right?
Yeah, well, I think that an instance where the asset owner occupies the property with their business and charge themselves rent, albeit perhaps a nominal rent,
Yep.
it would likely be less than what they would get on the market. But the great thing with real estate and with pricing real estate is that this will be reflected in any valuation. So if the APY is lower, what you can expect is a valuation to reflect that. So I don't necessarily see it as a negative in terms of achieving a lower yield. In fact, there are probably some risk factors that are greatly helped by having a property with a landlord occupies it. It gives the owner of the property a lot more agency to manage that property. So it very much could be seen as a plus. Yeah.
I think one interesting part when we're talking about APY and property and valuation is for those who went to our marketplace and tested out through the parking space, they can see on the available sale orders, for instance, you can clearly see that the APY obviously drops as the price per token increases. So your buy position is kind of important, and APY might be different. It's probably different for every single investor in buy or BSPT, because it depends on in which price you kind of opt into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and the market probably is going to reflect if APY is just too small, then the price of the asset might start dropping and people might be willing to buy into it only at lower entry points.
Yeah, the asset owner may see an APY of 2% is not very attractive to the market. So what they may choose to do is reduce their valuation for their initial sale and say, hey, actually, instead of issuing BSPT at $3 a token, let's bring it down to $2.50. And actually what that's going to do, of course, is bring the APY up to a more competitive level. So do
you see you might have asset valuations differ from token valuations? That's probably something like you have the property valuation as one metric, and then you have the token valuation, which is another metric. And you might have offerings at a discount from asset value, but you might have also offerings at a premium, because maybe the asset is valued under a different model, and then but the cash flow supports that premium on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a multitude of factors which can determine the price, and the asset owner has that agency to decide their initial listing price, and potential purchasers have the agency to decide not to purchase at that price, right? It's really the initial valuation that's done is that guideline to the asset owner, and they can decide to bring it down to be more competitive, or if, for example, the APY might be conservative, but it might be a very low risk property. There might be a lot of characteristics that make it a great investment, and your money is a lot safer in this one earning 2.5% than it would be earning 7.5% in another. And these are all considerations that potential purchasers of BSPT will want to make.
So this basically means that even though the real world valuation at the time of tokenization might be higher or lower than, or what you just said, the token offering could be lower than the valuation of the asset is by the valuer by the time they actually submit the property for tokenization. Is that what you like? Because on the secondary market, I can offer it.
Yeah, because lease, it depends on really on the asset type, right? Sometimes you have these lease agreements that are longer term, and then you have a market not inflating but increasing in value quite quicker than the actual lease agreements can follow. And this means the APY for that period of time is going to be lower. So if buyers might not be inclined to buy into a deal with lower APY because then they know that this kind of means they're buying at the higher market value than might be wise to do. Or because in the end it depends. But what we're trying to do with Oceanpoint is kind of offset the potential. You might buy into BSPT, hold a portion as is, earn revenues on the traditional APY model, and then you might have another portion staked in the community pool and earn BST as a booster to that APY. So that's what we're trying to achieve here, is make tokenized real estate really attractive for DeFi in the end. Because if we look at, but before we jump to the next thing, I wanted to ask you, what's the progress in the last week or last 2 weeks?
Sure.
Because I know we've had quite a lot of work done by Julia's team.
Absolutely.
Back in Australia, and now there's results coming in.
Yeah, so in terms of tokenization of real estate and the progress that's being made there, I can announce that last week we had 8 new properties tokenized in 2 countries, totaling around $5 million. So great week, very productive week, and it was followed by an equally productive week this week. This week we've done 7 properties, again in 2 countries, totaling $3 million. So totaling over the last 2 weeks, that's a tokenization of $8 million of real estate. So great progress for tokenizations. It's coming along very well.
The question that we pose ourselves with Blockchat sometimes is that really valuable, right? Onboarding properties for staking, what's the value there? And I think you experience the most by when you engage with these real estate owners, what's your kind of take out of this? What's the value for them when they do this, besides the obvious, right?
All right, so
which is monetary in the end, but yeah.
Of course, for them, basically, the value is what they're earning in staking, and which has fantastic results for them so far, which even might help them to cover the increased interest rates and stuff like that they're experiencing for the mortgages. For example, that can be their value proposition. In general, what we notice is if I go and I try to approach a property owner to tokenize real estate and pay so much money to do it all for the entire process, or even to set up a marketplace immediately, for example, then first of all they look at me and they ask me, what is tokenization? Then the second one is, many of them never ever even touched a wallet, a crypto wallet. It's a completely new space for them. Yes, of course, there are some that are already in crypto. They hold some Bitcoin, some Ethereum, and all of that. But in general, real estate tokenization is for them something completely new. I noticed as well, for example, if there's different countries, different openness. So a lot of my friends in Germany, for example, who own property, and they ask me, so Julia, what are you doing for living? What I never understood what your job is. Can you explain to me what you're doing? So I try to explain to them what is real estate tokenization. And they look at me and I use the example of their own properties and I try to explain to them what we can do, but it's a completely different. In Germany, you're pretty much like you go to work for your 40 hours a week, and there's not so many people doing, like, of course, if you know the right people, they do a lot of online stuff next to it as well. But the traditional circle of friends you have, especially in the countryside and so on,
Yeah.
they do not really do much online. And then they look at me and they're like, oh, this is not for me. Like, yes, this is like a completely different world.
Yes.
And even though some of them work in real estate, but they would never touch crypto because they feel so safe in real estate that it's so far away for them.
Yes.
In Australia, we found a way that property owners somehow are more open. It probably can also be that crypto is becoming really big in Australia, with over 25% of population owning cryptocurrency. And even in the education space, we like Techstack, our certified partner in Australia, we started to run education courses for agents. So we decided let's just educate them in general about blockchain and real estate. What is DeFi? What other use cases are there for blockchain? And then that got followed by the regulator approving these kind of courses, by Real Estate Institute of Australia doing a blockchain report together with RMIT University to really dive into this topic in Australia. What can be done using blockchain? And all of that added a lot of security for people. So people started to look into what are the possibilities and opportunities. And that kind of education together with tokenization, how we're offering it on Oceanpoint and with Blocksquare, that is basically a learning by doing experience for them. They can say, all right, I would like to go through the experience of tokenizing my property, where in the past it was super tech and super complicated, and I would say I'm staying away. That is, as well. And now they can do this process as almost like a learning by doing experience. They start to set up the first crypto wallet. They start to buying the first small amount of Ethereum because they need that to cover the fees. They're filling out the form about all the information that they need to submit about their property.
BST is basically their first altcoin that they can encounter besides Ethereum. So they have the experience of Ethereum, then the next is BST, right?
Yes.
So which is
Exactly.
you never forget your first, right?
Right.
That's right. So once they basically tokenize this property, they receive a digital twin basically of their property, if you see it like that. And then out of sudden they start earning cryptocurrency as an additional income stream for what the property generates anyways. And they don't have to buy anything, they don't have to sell anything. This can be just this first experience of and what's coming afterwards. That's a different story. But now they start learning and getting familiar with that ecosystem.
I have a question. Once you've taken them through these initial educational steps, and actually I'll be specific about how I phrase this. Instead of asking you how many people have given you a positive response, I'll ask you how many people have given you a negative. How many people have become a staker with their property from going as someone with very little knowledge of crypto, of tokenization. You've taken them through this journey and they've come out with a negative experience. Has that happened?
No. In general, what they're doing at the beginning, as the questions at the beginning, especially when it's real estate agents looking into it, they're like, how much can I earn? That's what they want to know, because for them it's like an additional, like they are after the money.
They're transactional, right? So
exactly. So
they need transactions in real estate to happen so they can
exactly. And now we can show them, examples, what similar to what others have experienced, because we are now in like operating for over a year now, and we have that experience. But at the beginning, we needed to find the innovators, the entrepreneurs, those who actually, in the space of crypto anyways, and who saw this as an amazing opportunity. And they said, you know what, even if I come out with zero, it doesn't matter, because I wanted to know how it is to go through this process. And I wanted to be one of the first in the world who's tokenizing real estate. And interesting to see is that every one of our people in Australia, for example, who were the first, like I think the first 5 properties, they are all working in the space now as well.
Interesting.
So they added that to their daily work and business model that they have.
Which is great, which is basically, there's a project that we're calling regional hubs. We're going to tell you what it is when it's ready. But I think that's great because that creates like a more involved community, which is perfect for regional hubs growth.
Yeah, and that's just great to hear that out of all of these individuals, from asset owners to brokers to real estate agents, that you've taken down this journey. None of them have come back saying, hey, this isn't for me. I don't want to stake my property. This isn't, the feedback has been excellent.
I do have one experience of this.
What experience?
It's a very good dear friend of mine. And he somehow understands Bitcoin. So he's been DCA in Bitcoin, He understands that, he's kind of following, obviously, whenever we go for beer or coffee or, just meet. And he owns some property, and his family owns property as well, but he's scared. So he has this, by nature, he's not a risk taker, even though I see him, he took above average risks in life. If you compare, the spectrum of people, I don't see him as a non-risk taker. But, today he's more of a, a laid back, vanilla type of person in terms of investment, in terms of things he does. And I haven't been able to I never push hard because it's, friends and etc. But I haven't been able to so far convince him of, trying it out with one property at least. Right.
I mean, if that, I had many who said no, who were too scared, who were what I watch now. But now what's happening is what we can see is there's like a dynamic that's building around that, because they're like, oh, hang on, there's already 14 properties tokenized.
Yeah.
Now they're like, I should give it a go.
There's some velocity happening and increasing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that maybe in our community, especially those newer, right, might wonder is, why are you guys onboarding also properties that are just owner occupied, for instance? Where's the value in that? I mean, you guys tokenize in the end, properties where BSPT is sellable in a way and makes sense for our community to buy into, etc. Right? But the fact is that numbers are important as well.
Yeah.
And the other fact is that it doesn't mean that if it's owner occupied, that we won't be able to place those BSPT on the market at a certain point in time.
Yeah, and on top of that, there is the added benefit of the network effect by bringing people in. They may also have rental properties themselves that they chose not to tokenize at this point.
Yeah.
They may have a large network of friends who have rental properties.
Exactly.
There doesn't seem to be a downside of allowing owner-occupied homes to be tokenized.
Yeah.
There only seems to be benefits. So
I see also one massive advantage in real estate tokenization. When was it? A week ago or 2 weeks ago? There was another news article about Victoria, which is another in Western Australia, but Victoria is another state in Australia. And I'm pretty sure it was from there. And they said there's now a new real estate owner tax coming up. And there's also some new fees that are coming up that haven't been there before, on top of the interest rates that were hitting the owners this year and all of that. So they were already saying that the tenants will actually feel that because their rent is getting higher again. And rent in Australia is already ridiculous expensive. There is not much supply at the moment either, so demand is shaping the price, and on top of that more and more taxes and more expenses coming towards the real estate owner, and then that goes again down to the tenant. And Airbnb has a massive impact on the Australian rent market as well. That's why there's not much long-term rental supply, and so on and so on. So the tenants really struggle in Australia. Rental is a big problem that is being addressed by REBA and RIA and all the other institutions there, and there's a lot of debates. And immediately it always goes down to the tenant. where I think, guys, if you're open for a solution, why don't you look into blockchain ecosystems? How can they be used in order to actually, cover that expense that's happening for the owner? What about, for example, solution number one could be, okay, if maybe the owner has to pay it first, but then gets it back later through solutions in the blockchain tokenization, like through staking, for example, or whatsoever, which is long term. But maybe they could even look into how can they use blockchain to create a rewards model for the tenants. So if you're a long-term tenant and you have been living in here for the last 2 years, for example, or 3 years, hey, you know what, this property generated now so much in the blockchain ecosystem that we can actually pay back that tax you actually paid for us. Stuff like that. So you can basically work with the return or tenant rewards model if you want. So you could actually, find new solutions that cover the cost. So it's not always coming from the tenant's pocket.
Yeah, we can think outside of the box a little bit here. I think with a little dash of ingenuity and with blockchain, a lot of these problems that have come up can be solved with new.
Yeah, and staking is, for example, one solution here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the way we're doing this with Oceanpoint, obviously, it can't run forever, right? So we have said to ourselves, look, we have the 6 years in front of us, so 5 years, to transform this into a money-generating ecosystem from rental revenues, from purchase sales, secondary market, etc. And that ultimately creates value, and there's no requirement for staking as such in this way, but the staking rewards come from the actual money generation behind it, right?
Yes.
So, but until then, it's a gamified way of bringing real estate owners together onto an infrastructure using tokenization to explore new models of how they can, maybe surpass current challenges for a year or two. Because sometimes all you need is a solution, a short-term solution that it might even turn into a long-term thing that you've done. And property owners that are staking today will definitely be able to leverage this in the coming years. And the more properties we add to the asset pool, the issuers pool, the higher the competition, the lower the rewards per owner in the end, right? So the distribution kind of goes around.
I think the goal is that it becomes normal.
Yeah.
That the consideration of tokenization for a real estate owner becomes just normal. So they're not scared anymore. They see that, if you talk with them at the first stage, some say, oh, DeFi, and I hear on all the scams, and people are, which all was CeFi, not DeFi, with the exchanges going down and so on. So they are still a bit shocked and afraid to go in that direction because they hear from their friends and their uncles and all of that.
Of course.
This happening to them. So our job is just give them a good experience. And if we can give them a good experience and show them, there is actually a DeFi platform that is even backed by something, which is real estate.
Yeah.
And that, fires the engine basically that we can operate for many, many, many years. And this is becoming this ecosystem maybe everyone is looking for.
Yeah.
Maybe that is a really, really good solution for the entire industry. But we're still in the early days.
Hopefully it is. I mean, we're investing our times and money into basically creating that future, right? But talking about experiences, we've done a field trip yesterday.
Oh yes. Look at the smile on Julia's face, everybody.
And the only one who's as excited as I am.
Yeah, we have one very happy lady here.
So Julia, you're gonna tell us, or
yes, we went to see the first and only tokenized parking space in the world.
Yes. So, and people won't believe us probably, but here you go.
There it is.
This is the famous parking space.
Yeah, in all its glory.
But you won't believe. I mean, it was really a struggling time. 2018. We've just had like this pre-ICO or pre-sale of tokens, the second stage done. One was done earlier and then one was done a bit later. The market was crashing, Ethereum was going down. We had it announced, so let's do it. And we're gonna continue anyways because this is really interesting what we've come across. And then what happened is nobody wanted to offer their property for us to test with. Not a single real estate owner in Ljubljana wanted to, we've reached out to one saying they were interested, but then they were hesitant. They were interested, they were hesitant. Why? Because the only incentive for them to tokenize real estate at the time was to tokenize their property, the whole property. That was it was just either the whole thing or nothing. That was the first part. If it's the whole thing, if it's commercial property, you get to 1 million quite quickly. If it's an apartment, it can be lower, obviously. But the apartments are usually held by individuals. So it was, and the other option was to transfer it onto a legal entity or by the legal entity to buy it. So nobody wanted to do that. And the 1.5 million properties that we were kind of talking about, our community was not big enough. And plus with the downside of the crypto market, people were short, right? So it was kind of hard to expect the 1.5 million raise to purchase a whole property.
And then one day, walk into your car to go home, you turn, your eyes lock, and then it was love at first sight.
No.
Dennis turns and he sees the beautiful F2 parking space.
Which one to choose?
This is the one for us.
Here we are. Yesterday. So it was actually what happened is we were sitting at a meeting in Medius, which you guys visited yesterday as well. And we were discussing this because they had like 6 parking spaces and I was using one every once in a while when I was working with the developer team there. And we were discussing they said we wanted to buy a bit more of parking spaces, but there's not many available and it's not available to rent them. And I was like, oh, they're not available. Well, they are available, but under another building, which is not so convenient for our office, but there's a supply there, but you can't rent them. You can only buy them, but we wouldn't buy those because they're too far from our office, right? But renting, they would rent them for their employees. And I was like, okay, what if we just go asking how much one would be to buy it, right? And it was like, yeah, we could rent it out.
A light bulb moment.
Yeah, we couldn't convince anyone else, but we can do a proof of concept. We can, move the needle forward. And then we bought that parking space without knowing if we will be able to even get anyone to buy into it afterwards. So we spent a good portion, I would say, or because the money raised was not big, it was some of it, but we definitely didn't provision for us buying into the property. But at the same time, it was not that big of an expense. It was 16K, I believe, to purchase it. So it was doable. Even if we would not be able to sell it so quickly, we said, okay, look, in 6 months, we're probably going to do it. And then 14 days after announcing it, it was gone. Right? Yeah. So it was 18 days or something. But yeah, quite cool stuff. In any ways, anyone can buy it today on Oceanpoint's marketplace. Yeah. There's, I think, some tokens available.
So everyone
not
here...
Not many though, because I think 83% of the property is actually being staked.
Yeah.
Last time I checked. Okay. Yeah. So I think there's maybe a percentage or 2 to be purchased. Yeah. And that's all.
There's
it's
not much,
500 tokens or
Which brings us back to the conversation we had at the beginning when we were talking about the price of the token offerings on the secondary market. So what happened to the parking space is a pretty good example that I think officially the valuation when it launched, Oceanpoint was 23 cents. Or DAI, 0.23 in DAI basically.
Maybe
something. Now secondary market offers up to 31.
There's nobody
so that
selling.
is basically so people are asking
par.
for more, and the reason why they're asking more and the reason why
it's the staking part.
why the people were buying was because if you stake your BSPT on Oceanpoint in the community asset pool, then at the moment the APY is 60%.
It's 60%.
Yes, yesterday it was 60%.
Oh wow!
It was first between 30 and
Sounds
35,
like a
now
good deal,
60.
doesn't it?
So the returns at the moment, of course, once we start adding more properties to the secondary market, that's a different story. That's going to change.
But
this week,
how rewards are distributed, right? They take the two asset pools and then they divide it by value staked.
So it's only value in there.
So it's the amount that of BST being dropped in. It's not huge.
Exactly.
It's not huge, but the APY compared to the price of the asset that you're buying at is
So it's really high. So it's probably going to go down to 30, 35, something like that. So it's definitely going to change.
Let's see what happens with the next property we do.
Exactly.
Right?
It can completely change. But it just shows that, and then the combination with the BST that's being earned as well, because the BST can change from today to tomorrow as well. So it can go up, it can go down, you never know. But at the same time, this is when you then combine the, pretty safe income from real estate. And then you combine that with the dynamic of the DeFi system and the DeFi pools and everything we have been experiencing there for many years. You bring these two together, that's really very powerful. And that is something completely new as well. But this is just boosting basically a 5% APY to right now a 60%, which can be 30 or something like that very soon. But we don't know, we will see. But it's not going to go lower than that.
That's in times where BST price is a bit under pressure, just like all of crypto with the news on Binance and Coinbase and the SEC and those. And I wonder how those proceedings will go and progress. But I don't want to. I don't know. I'm really cheering for at least one of those two players to win.
And
their case, right?
For us, I think for us, where there might be some turbulence in the market, but we're focusing on the mission. We're tokenizing property. We're bringing it to the community. We're growing the ecosystem, and keeping that tunnel vision on the mission. I mean, we just keep on going. We've just expanded our team this past week again with a junior front-end developer and previously with a senior full-stack developer. And the reason for it is so that right now our front-end developer, he was kind of between two projects, so on the marketplaces and on Oceanpoint. And every time we had a new iteration on Oceanpoint, the marketplace was kind of really progressing slowly. So having a senior developer on each project is really important on the front-end side, because then the progress of junior developers obviously can follow. Otherwise they're kind of left in the how do you say, in the blue? Left in the, I would say left
in the dark. So now I hope the progress will kind of simultaneously go forward, and we'll be able to iterate to the next stage of Oceanpoint 0.5. And on the marketplaces we have as well. We're just finishing up a marketplace for a new operator based in the US.
Very exciting. The US, that's brilliant. And of course, talking of V5 and talking about next steps, I believe you had a little small announcement that you perhaps wanted to tease the community with in terms of potential listings?
Well, that's something we can't discuss in terms of listings, but we've received a couple of, obviously, after listing on MXC, you receive certain
properties.
Oh, yeah. In terms of properties, we have this pipeline that we built. We've tokenized how many properties now?
We're well over 60. I believe the number's about 65, maybe pushing
Alright.
70.
So there's a couple of criteria so that you guys are aware, obviously, but there's a couple of things that need to happen. Like each new real estate owner, when they start staking in the issuer pool, they have the 6-month lock period, right? So what happens after the 6 months, it's a possibility for the 10,000 BSPT so the 10% that they've tokenized, for them to sell it on the secondary market. Obviously, if it passes the eligibility criteria that we've set when doing the risk assessment there's 2 risk assessments. One is for staking, and the other one is for offering it to the community. Now, from those 60 properties, obviously not all fit that criteria. That's for sure. But the properties that have an ownership under an LLC, they have at least that tick box checked, and obviously they need to have a commercial value, so a commercial agreement. And we have a couple of properties like this lined up, and we're gonna, based on demand on the marketplace, which means based on the amount of users that pass KYC and go through whitelisting, and they're whitelisted there, we're gonna start offering those properties as we go, so that we increase the TVL in the community pool for staking. Because I believe that some people will buy into BSPT just to hold and have a regular return and die, but some of them are going to also opt in for the community pool for staking. So one of the next properties is probably going to be a property that I'm invested in. It's a student house in Ljubljana here, and it has 32 tenants.
Wow, great.
Individual tenants, individual students that rent either a single room or a double room. So it's kind of like this. It's kind of considered like, you could consider like a hotel, but it's obviously for long term. So it's a 12-month lease every time. The start is on the 1st of October and ends end of September. They have a right to renew the lease. Every time each time it's a new basically agreement. So every time is revalued based on what's happening on the market. And there's been quite an increase for next year because of the energy costs going up, and because of, as well, interest rates. There's a mortgage on that property. It used to be about $500,000. Now it's being paid, I would say, 2/5 of it. So there's $300K of mortgage left. Cash flow is really good from those lease agreements, and it's kind of the beauty of it. Even if one of the tenants has some issue making payments, or their parents, etc., which is usually not the case, really. Even in COVID times, we were able to basically execute 95%, I would say, of all the agreements went through normally, and then 5% were, let's say, negotiated a bit, because some people really couldn't afford anything. They were really struggling, and in those cases, the negotiation that I kind of proposed there was, the solution I proposed was, look, you can't pay it now. Let me extend your time until which you need to repay. So instead of, you can't pay for the next 6 months, that's fine. It's not like everybody has this issue, but we extend it for another 12 months. Even though you're not a tenant anymore, you can, pay it off as you go afterwards. So I think 2 tenants took this kind of option, and which basically then brings me to, actually we've done 100% in the end, right?
Yeah. One of the great things about a property like this, which the community can expect to start to see in the coming weeks, when we start to bring out the BSPT analytics reports, where you'll be able to do deep dives into properties and their characteristics, is the diversification in tenancy. It's a great benefit from a risk perspective. Of course, if you have one apartment with one tenant and they leave, that's 100% of the income. However, if you have a property such as the one that Denis has invested in with over 30 tenants, if one tenant leaves or you come to problems in terms of payment, that only makes up a small percentage of the overall revenue. So in terms of diversification, you'll be getting a risk rating of 5.
I don't know. It's up to you to make that risk rating. I really want to know what the risk situation is, and the risk framework is exactly for this, to inform also landlords to understand, how is their investment composed.
Yeah,
it's an information that goes beyond the tokenization part, even though it makes so much sense when it's tokenized, because you as a token investor, you basically are invested in the whole, not just a building, but the management of it, the lease agreements that are put in place, and so forth. And in the instance of my student housing business, which I'm not focusing so much. It's 50 tenants after 7 years. If I would not be focusing fully on Blocksquare, I probably have 500 tenants right now. But it's that those lease agreements are really, really neat. So they're full year agreements, 12-month installments. So they're not monthly agreements. So full year, 12-month installments. So there's no outage anytime, even in the summertime. There's on average 2.5 years that a tenant is a tenant of the room, which means they renew mostly until the end of their studies, or maybe just, they then change, maybe they go abroad, or maybe they basically fail and stop their studies. That's also a reason. But on average, I think it's like 2.5 years, maybe even 2.7. So there's this recurrency of renewing lease agreements. There's about 30% that change of all the tenants that are the change every year. And already now, which is June, I have all the pre-reservations filled
for October. You're already ready for October.
It's already done.
Wow.
Beautiful. Wow, that's great.
Okay.
So it's like, and in the lease agreements, when you do a down payment, it's done in a way that even if they would, quit in June, for instance, they say, okay, now I've done all my exams, I don't need it anymore. They've made a prepayment for September at the time of reservation. So the last month is already covered. There's only 2 months left. And the down payment actually covers for most of the 2 months. So even in that case, it goes through the whole amount by 97%. Because the first 6 months are a bit higher on a monthly rate level, the installments, because you have heating and all those and all that stuff that comes with it. And then the last 6 months are 30% slower. So that's how I kind of shape the lease agreements over time. Obviously, this is not something that you come up initially and then you have, you slowly. So yeah.
I mean, I can see why student housing is popular here, because it's a university city, right? It's a massive university here. I find it really international here as well. Like I see a lot of tourists and also like a lot of students working in bars and all of that. There's like bars everywhere along the water, and there's always something happening here. It's really nice. Massive old town, and come visit Ljubljana and Blocksquare.
Airbnb actually decreased the amount of supply for students. That's one reason why I went into student housing as an investment. The other one is that it's not binary. Tenant yes or no. The third reason is these houses that used to be built like 40, 50 years ago were built with the parents at the time. They said, okay, we're going to build a big house, and then our kids are going to live there with their families, right?
All generations.
Doesn't exist. So new generation, they tend to go into apartments. They don't want to have a house with a garden to manage and all those expenses that come with it. So because of the pace of life. So now you have a lot of houses that are kind of neglected within Ljubljana in relatively good locations. You just need to find a house of around 300 square meters. That's the bottleneck, but you can find those, and that's already close to a deal for a new one.
So that student house that you tokenize, is that quite central, or is it a little bit outside, or what's the location?
So there's two student houses. The one that I was talking about today. So one is on where we were yesterday in Tech Park. So on the hill on top, there's a residential area. So one
close
is there,
to the parking space.
Close to the parking space, and close to the Faculty of Computer Science and Biotechnology. But this other one is actually like a 15-minute walk from Dragon Bridge, which is like centrally near the market, by the market. And there's good connection with the bus. Mainly you have the Faculty of Sports Sciences, of Medicine, for nurses, law school, and I think administration, general administration, I think. So there's in that radius, there's about 15,000 students that are searching for accommodation. Yeah.
And there's Denis waving them into the student house. Come on in, guys. 12 months up front.
And if you buy some tokens, you even get cash back.
Come and stay in the first tokenized student house in the world.
No, I think if we can prove through this process that a business can increase their supply or their amount of managed properties that can reinvest in, because the next thing that from tokens being sold, the next thing that the company will do, it's gonna basically buy into another property of this type. Because there's shortage of supply. And that's the logic thing to do, I think.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great exercise in showing what can be done with accessing liquidity in your existing properties through tokenization and using it to scale your investment model. Yeah, I think that'd be a really interesting and good exercise.
All right. Okay. I think we're. Oh my God! It's 1 hour.
Oh,
wow.
That was a long vlog chat.
That was even longer than with Makram. I hope we said more.
Forgot we were recording for a while, just talking.
But it was a great discussion. It was kind of like we had a meeting and we were recording it in a way. So thanks everybody for watching, and see you next week, I guess. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Julia, and enjoy. Ciao.
Ciao.